There are many games, and even movies and TV shows, which people say would be nothing without their soundtracks. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Zelda, Final Fantasy, Halo, or even Mario. Media needs and often underappreciates the amazing music that brings movies or games together. No other game ties the two together so perfectly, quite like Shigesato Itoi's one and only game series, an elusive and uniquely strange triumph. Welcome to the world of Mother. Music plays a big part in the Mother series. Even beyond characters being named after modes in music theory, or the fact that almost 30% of Earthbound's disk space is just music. The music of Mother series is just like the game, strange, diverse, and unique. And that's mainly thanks to these men, musician Keiichi Suzuki and video game composer Hirokazu Tanaka. They worked together, taking extra time and needing extra money, specifically for the soundtrack of Mother, something that usually wasn't focused on much at Nintendo at the time. The game's creator, Itoi, wanted to do something unique with the music. At the beginning, Tanaka was creating more standard video game music for the game, but Itoi felt that he wanted something special for the soundtrack. In fact, much of the tension during the game's creation was from debates about the music. Going in, the designers wanted the music to really have impact on the story, something not many games were doing so in the 80s. The designers saying their goal was to establish the rules that govern the audio for this world. There were considerations in terms of how time and space were related, how characters were associated with one another, and how the concepts of good and evil were represented. Which, for a game in 1989, sounds very big, but somehow really fits Mother. And the choice to inextricably tie the music directly into the story and characters paid off. The Mother series' biggest praise is often its soundtrack. The influences of Mother's soundtrack are all over the place. Some songs sound unique. Others walk a very fine line. Some being pretty much just the same song. Something like the introduction of the track Hospital sounds like the starting of a song, right off Plastic Beach. Elements of techno, funk, reggae, and more help give Mother its own style, something that's unique to Mother itself. It doesn't conform to the standard symphonic fantasy music from most other RPGs. Mother decides instead to diversify its soundtrack. With so many influences, I can't even name them all here. These are the ones I could find, but I'm sure I'm missing some. And anyone who wants to delve further, I'll put a couple videos to check out in the description. Some of the music was even recorded in England, with songs sung by English musician Catherine Warwick, something Nintendo had never done. soundtrack even going on to have a vinyl record release, possibly the first game from the 80s ever to do so. Not to mention the use of St. Paul's Cathedral Choir. Composer Shogo Sakai would take over the music for the third game, really expanding upon Tanaka and Suzuki's score. Mixing the original music with his own take, he really worked to ensure the entire series was represented in the music. Sakai's greatest feat was to create the battle music, and to work with the game designers to include the battle music as an interactive part of the battles themselves. In Mother 3, when you're performing attacks, by tapping the A button to the beat of the battle themes, you could deliver combos for extra damage. How much extra damage depended on how long and how well you could tap to the beat. It's such a game changer to include some additional interactivity in these scenes, because think about how often during battles like these, it's just mashing A until they're over, or how boring it is to defeat the same thing over and over again. With a simple addition of some rhythm game mechanics, the battles in the game open up. Instead of music being a background element in the battles, players are encouraged to listen intently. And it wasn't the same battle theme that played every time. Each monster or enemy group had their own theme. This wasn't a throwaway. With 56 battle themes in all, the player would have variety throughout the game. And what helped keep it fresh wasn't just the number of themes, but how the themes were constructed. When people hear that you had to press A to the beat, they're usually thinking of something like this. But to really challenge the player, themes aren't steady. They changed timings, had different verses, and had rests in parts to keep the player on their toes. Here, we can see the beat isn't constant. It changes timing, and then the beat itself changes after 6 bars. As the difficulty of the enemies progresses, so do the mechanics of the rhythm fights, like here, where the timing is non-standard and the beat is more complex. Eventually, you get to areas where the beat to tap to is almost an addition to the music, rather than in line with it, as if you're now playing an instrument as part of an arrangement. Dan Bruno does an amazing job analyzing these in detail, and I'll link his analysis in the description for those interested. Beyond anything else, the music of Mother is consistent and is supported by purpose. The music all works to help tell the story, and most importantly, to give us ideas of how things connect in the Mother world. Not just physically or logically, but thematically. No main character has their own theme, but places do. This means that no matter who comes back to a place, there's recognition in it, not just in the visuals. This is really important for a series like Mother, where things can change drastically in certain locations, and there's multiple characters. The music helps ground that connection to places or things or people. But more importantly, the music is used to connect things that might otherwise seem disconnected. One of the most clear examples of this is the song "It Is Finished," which goes from a sound similar to the song "I Am Porky" from earlier in the game, into something very similar to the love theme, used mainly for the main character Lucas's family. considering this is when his brother Klaus is breaking free of Porky's influence, as his mother calls to him from beyond the grave and he eventually relents and stops attacking his brother. The music is telling the story too, using themes it had set up well before, and then in one song telling us what is happening to Klaus, who is influencing him, and whose influence eventually wins out. Maybe even more meaningfully is that the song I Am Porky was influenced by the theme of Godzilla, denoting a big bad character. Though, like Godzilla, Porky's not just an evil monster, but a product of circumstance, and often misunderstood as a villain himself. Godzilla being arguably the most influential Japanese film of the 20th century, the meaning behind it was certainly not lost on Sakai. And there's countless more themes that pop in here and there, indicating beyond the dialogue and visuals what is happening in the story, or how people are changing, growing, or interacting with others. Themes are reused multiple times, and even over multiple games. So the themes pick up different meanings, which helps the player understand how things evolve throughout each game, and all games in the series. These themes are used in happy, sad, or even comical moments. Instead of having one theme for sad moments and one for happy, which essentially is telling you how to feel, Mother establishes a theme and will use it in any moment, altering it to fit the mood. It makes things much more impactful and can create a bittersweet feeling, a term you could use for the whole Mother series, both in-game and for the series itself. Mother's had a tough time as a series, facing a lack of international releases and an unwillingness to make it easily playable for fans. Being set in a modern setting, it differentiates itself from most other RPGs, especially when it was released in 1989. It focuses a lot on humor, relationships between characters, and an abstract but deeply emotional story. Why it differs so much might be because the people in charge of designing it weren't game designers. Other than a single fishing game, the creator, Itoi, never made other games other than Mother. And its mysteriousness compounded by the fact that the first and third games never got initial releases outside Japan. It's unforgiving and challenging, but a product of its time, and the writing is charming enough to get it through. Considering the series has been the influence of things like documentaries, South Park, Undertale, Lisa, and Oddity, and has a staunchly supportive fanbase to this day, over 33 years after its release, Mother is amazing. Mother 2, or Earthbound in North America, is the only game with a non-Japanese release, and it did not sell well. First, getting panned by critics and having a strange and honestly poor marketing campaign, only to be acclaimed as one of the best Super Nintendo games in recent years. And that's no small feat, given the SNES library. It's still challenging in some areas, but it's got the charm, writing, and fun factor dialed way up. It's much more about the characters and their interactions, which may be why everyone has different things to say once the game is over. It's probably the best known game in the Mother series due to its North American release, and it's what most people think of when they hear Earthbound or Mother outside of Japan. In fact, many people likely don't even know it's a series, they just think it's this one game. Both Mother 1 and 2 were released onto Nintendo Online recently, though not Mother 3. I'm at least glad to see Mother is becoming even a little bit more accessible, instead of being that series Ness and Lucas from Smash are from. The third Mother game might be the best, bringing together perfectly two often considered opposite things, tragedy and comedy. Now, I love media where it's hard to find where the comedy ends and the tragedy begins, and Mother 3 is arguably the best example of it in gaming. Mother 3 would also close the series with an ending that is just as unique as the games, which some people didn't like. For Mother though, I personally think it really fits. Itoi confirmed there would be no more Mother games, and seeing as how Nintendo is almost afraid to even talk about the series, Mother isn't likely to be back. But maybe that's a good thing. The Mother series doesn't need a remake, it still holds up. So please, if you can find a way, check out Mother, whether it's the soundtrack, a Let's Play, or the games themselves. It's one of the great video game franchises, even if it's often overlooked. And in more ways than one, it's difficult to play. But don't let that discourage you. Give it a shot. After all, it could only cost you your life. And you got that